In this edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus, I will be talking about nighttime photography using the Nikon Z8 mirrorless camera and the 50mm 1.4 Z-mount lens. I had the camera set for auto ISO. My aperture varied from 1.6 to 2.0, and my shutter speed varied as well. Usually it was a 60th or an 80th of a second, and matrix metering. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles won the NFC championship against the Washington Commanders. And as usual, anytime one of the Philadelphia sports teams win a championship, the crowds take to Broad Street to celebrate. So I went out with my Z8 and just took a bunch of shots walking down Broad Street. And the police had closed off one side of Broad Street. Now, Broad Street goes both north and south. So the south side was closed off, and there was just traffic on the side going north. And the crowd kept growing as time went on, and people were out in their Eagles garb. There was plenty of beer, and people were just having a good time, and I tried to capture it. And I had the camera set for continuous focus because people were in constant motion. And as I proceeded down the street, the light kept changing. So my ISO kept changing. It seemed like every few steps I took, we were in different light, whether it was the lights from some of the buildings or the street lights. And in some cases, there was almost no light at all. So here you could see part of the huge crowd. At this point here, the traffic stopped. They cut the traffic off completely as we went further south. And here's a reporter from one of the local TV stations, and she was in good light from her photographer's light on his camera. So I got some good images of her. And this was at 1.6. And this lens is really sharp, wide open. I know people say the 51.8 is sharper, and I'm sure it is, but for me, the 51.4 is plenty sharp. So here you could just see how many people were out there. It was a huge crowd. Very little depth of field, of course, because I was shooting wide open. And there were people in all kinds of Eagles dress. I mean, some people painted their faces, others wore masks. They were carrying flags, and it was really a fun event, a lot of subjects to shoot, but it wasn't easy because the light was so low. And these guys just said, "Take our picture," and they all posed for me. Their hand gestures changed in a few seconds, so I couldn't use those pictures. But these guys were tossing a football around, and it was so nice to see people getting along, having a great time. And I really like shooting things like this, celebrations like this, parades, various events where I could just go out there and shoot mostly candid pictures. Don't have to worry about posing people. Just go with the available light and just try to get some good images. Now, I was just working with that one lens. That's the fastest autofocus lens that I own. Actually, it's the fastest lens of any type that I own. Now, in the past, if I had tried to shoot something like this back in the days before autofocus, it would have been very difficult, if not impossible, to get in focus images of people moving at such wide aperture. So you would just had to have shot a lot of pictures and hope for the best. So the autofocus is really a big help, especially as you get older and your eyesight is not as good. It's more difficult for me to focus a manual focus film camera now than it was years ago. So the autofocus really helps. Now this image was at 1.6, yet it still has a decent amount of depth of field to keep all these people in reasonable focus. They're not all real sharp, but as long as you don't enlarge this too much, it's fine. And as far as color balance, well, I just used auto white balance, and I wasn't too worried that some of these pictures are going to be warmer than others. The light, like I said, was constantly changing. The color of the light was changing. Now, this is real warm. This was in some incandescent light from a store, I believe. So, you just can't worry about stuff like that. Of course, I could have always just shot this in black and white or converted it to black and white. Now, this was really difficult. These two young ladies were on the shoulders of a couple friends, and they were mostly facing away from me, and I just got as close as I could and waited for one of them to turn. It's not a great shot, but I guess my experience as a newspaper photographer for years, you try to capture everything that's happening. Now, when I was working for the newspaper, shots like this, I would have to get names and usually the age and, approximately where they live, what part of the city they lived. But when you're shooting stuff like this for yourself, or in this case, to put on a YouTube video, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to get names. So it makes it much easier. You could concentrate more on just finding the best shots and shooting a lot. And that was a real headache when shooting for the paper. I would take a shot, I thought it was a good shot, and then go over and try to get names. And sometimes people won't want to give you their names. Now, these gentlemen here, they asked me to take their picture, and they were having a real good time. And they asked me how they could get the picture, so I gave this one gentleman my Instagram, and the next day put them on Instagram. And that's something I don't do too much of, make use of Instagram. I probably should. And I have to say, I am pretty pleased with the results with the Z8 and the 51.4 at very high ISOs. Like I said, some of these images were 12,800 in poor light in many cases, with the lens at either 1.6 or 2.0. Why didn't I shoot at 1.4? I really don't know. The lens is just as sharp at 1.6 as it is at 1.4. I guess I figure maybe I'll get a little more depth of field. Not much. But anyway, this young man climbed this tree, and I just worked my way around, and when I could see his head between the branches, I took a couple frames. But this is something I don't recommend anyone do. A little later in the evening in Center City, Philadelphia, an 18-year-old fell off a light pole and later died. So I don't advise that at all. Stay off the poles, stay out of the trees, stay on the ground, and have a good time. So that's just about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you have any questions or comments on this video, please leave them in the comments below. I always try to respond to all questions and comments. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.